It's not moving. Oh, there we go. Okay, as you can see, I don't like to say how many years experience I have because my gray hair usually says most of it, and we went over most of these items that I'm working on for packaging in my introduction. The TC 122, in case you don't know, is a technical committee for packaging in the ISO group. So I try and report on what's happening in the SC3 group, which is subcommittee 3, and that has to do with the performance requirements and tests for means of packaging, packages, and unit loads. A tag means that I am a technical advisory group lead, where I try and make sure that all the standards that are coming out under that TC group are sent to SMEs in the United States so we can gather our comments and make it back to ISO on what we see. You have to remember though, unfortunately, the United States only gets one vote, as well as England or France and Spain and all the other countries that are involved on whether the standards are something we like or not. So that's why it's really good if you can get into the work groups or some of the other SME groups to actually work on standards as they're written, because then the United States can have a little bit more emphasis on what we need done, which is what we did with 11607. 11607 is actually out of the TC 198 group, which is on sterilization. So just for fun, I put in a few of the products that I actually got to work on before I got into medical devices, or as I got into medical devices, because I did work on in vitro diagnostics for quite a while, where everything was shipped 2 to 8 degrees. Some of my current work, these are just pictures of a few things I've worked on, active and inactive devices, pre-filled syringes, blisters for tablets, wraps. So it's been a wide variety of packaging work. Now, with the titles, I'm sure if you are working in terminally sterilized medical devices, you know that the -1 is for design and development of the packaging, and the -2 is for equipment and process validations. The current revision is 2006, with an amendment that was done in 2014 in order to clarify and fix a couple of little errors or things that were being considered incorrectly. As you know, the timeline, we had these published in 2006. Amy put out a TIR 22 on how to comply with it, because most ISO documents are pretty general. They don't tell you specifically how to do different tests. And that's what the Amy TIR 22 was meant to do. It was converted into an ISO TS document, 16775, in 2014. It's a little harder to read because they have a lot more information in there for hospitals, because hospitals also do sterile packaging, terminally sterilized packaging, and they need a lot of help. It is being revised, the ISO documents, and they're expected to be published probably this quarter. You can never be quite sure about ISO publications though. I have heard of them sitting on them for 3 years before they actually publish them, but these are documents that a lot of people use, so we're hoping they'll get out sooner than that. As a special little note, I do have page numbers on each slide, so if you have a question you can't get in and get answered, write down the number of the slide so we can get back to it if we need to. I want to make sure you know that on the ISO documents in Europe, they usually expect you to comply within a year after publication, and the FDA generally expects compliance upon publication, because the FDA did harmonize with the 11607 standard and have people on the committees that help write that. The big issue that happens is we can't do that with ISO documents because they keep them very close to their vest before they're published. And that's why they usually have this 1 year for compliance afterwards. The ISO 11607 standards were the first time to put packaging on the same importance level as the product, which is a big deal. And it was difficult to get written in the first place. They took something like 6 years before they got something everybody could agree on around the world for voting on. I'm sure if you are working in medical devices, you've counted and seen there's over 115 shalls. That means that you have to do it in order to comply with the standard or have some kind of justification not to. Now, I'm saying there's going to be more on this later because I talk about it a little farther on in the presentation. We had new terminology, and that was quite a difference for us, especially on this sterile barrier system, because we tended to talk about that as the primary package. And the primary package was confusing terminology for most of the world or a lot of the world. So they've decided to call it a sterile barrier system. That's when it's closed and actually sterilized with a product in it. And you can't have the product without the sterilization being acceptable too. I have some examples for the terminology. So with a terminal sterilization means you've sterilized it and it's validated for that. And you have to have the worst case situations going on. Worst case sterilization for microbes is generally at the lower end of whatever your cycle is that you're using. Worst case for packaging is generally at the higher end, especially for ETO or something that has heat. You want to make it as hot as possible in order to see if you can affect the packages and the materials. I've had to learn about biological indicators. There are standards for that, and learn how to do placements. Those are little things that you put into a product. It could be a liquid, it could be a strip, or some kind of a thing that will carry spores of bacteria that need to be killed during sterilization. So that's a good thing to learn about. For me, shorthand, we just need to keep holes out of the sterile barrier system during packaging, storage, shipment, and handling in order to make sure that it stays terminally sterilized until the point of use. Below are a few of the different types of common sterilization methods that are out there. There are new ones being developed, but you have to see how that kind of sterilization method will affect your package. So the sterile barrier system includes all of these types of things. So here's a wrap that's common in hospitals, and then there's other types of pieces that people use for sterile barrier system. Preformed sterile barrier system just means the package system before a product is put in it with the final seal. Those are generally pouches, trays, or some combination of that for medical devices. Then we have protected packaging. That's anything outside of the sterile barrier system that keeps it from getting a hole in it. Generally, in many medical device companies, they put it into a folding carton paperboard that's put into a corrugated case. Then the corrugated case may be put on a pallet, or it could be packaged with some types of protective barrier for temperature or cushioning.